Ohio State's headed to the Pacific Northwest. Oregon is hosting the matchup of the millennium in the Big Ten. And we've got a number 2 versus number 3 matchup. Oops, it's all Ducks and Bucks. Big Ten breakfast is now served.
Welcome back to Big Ten
Breakfast,
the Big Ten preview show that's part preview show, also part Yelp review. On today's episode, we are going to highlight Studio One, Dan? Studio One in Eugene?
Studio One Cafe, right by campus in Eugene. Looks terrific. Well, I don't think it was there when I was there. When was I in college? 3-4 years ago, Ty?
yeah. Multiply that out a few times, yeah.
Yeah. But no, looks great. Can't wait to dive in from afar.
So look, this is sort of like your fiesta, this episode. This is going to be all Ducks and Bucks, a big game this weekend with Ohio State traveling west a couple time zones, squaring off against your Oregon Ducks, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, at night Eastern Time, late in the day Western Time on NBC.
Yes, so we're going to do it, and we're going to view it through the lens of colorful cereal, right? It's Oregon, it's flashy, it's colors, it's loud, and Saturday, what's better than cereal on Saturday, not morning, but Saturdays in general? We're going to go first here with Captain Crunch, Ty. Who is Captain Crunch Time? That's right, Ty. Tying it there. We did Oops, All Ducks and Bucks. Who is the quarterback you trust the most or you think of if this game is a 4-point game and a quarterback has 2 minutes and 19 seconds? Let's even call it 1 minute and 38 seconds left, so they don't even have the 2-minute warning. Between Will Howard and Dillon Gabriel, where does your mind go?
I still think the answer is Dillon Gabriel. I did watch the game a week ago where he threw 2 red zone picks, and that did not leave anyone too inspired. But look, this guy's been around college football forever. I still have a lot of confidence in his ability to call the offense and feel comfortable back there. I do feel like it has been a bit of a slow burn getting him to the point where it feels like he is making the offense better as opposed to just somebody else who is on the team. But by and large, push comes to shove. You're at home. You've got the crowd backing you. I got to go Dillon Gabriel. I just have to. I can't go Will Howard. I know Will Howard always has like 1 interception in him per game. So give me Dillon Gabriel at home.
I think I agree with you, and I went back and forth on this one because of the sloppiness in the red zone. It's 3 red zone picks the last 2 games for Dillon Gabriel. One was a pick 6 against UCLA, and then 2 against Michigan State that he was just late. He was not decisive, panicked a little bit, and one was a great play from Michigan State, but you can't put the other team in the position to make those plays. There is something that Dillon Gabriel has done that Will Howard has not, and that is he beat a playoff team on a neutral field in Texas last year, drove that team down late, threw the game-winning touchdown to the corner of the end zone after the pocket collapsed, and it does not get more Captain Crunch than doing that in a rivalry spot, which is actually this same weekend, mind you, in Dallas. Yeah. So Dillon Gabriel, to me, has that edge that I would be more nervous to watch Will Howard quarterbacking my team. And I think Will Howard happens to be really, really good. But because we've seen it from Dillon Gabriel, even with this season's miscues, I think there is just going to be something innate in Dillon Gabriel that gives him that slight edge. Even with receivers not as good, perhaps an offensive coordinator not quite as good, that sometimes that he'll have a little bit more poise. I think it's meaningful.
Let me ask you this, though, okay? If Dillon Gabriel is Captain Crunch,
yeah,
what play in Oregon's repertoire would you consider Excelsior, as we say on the podcast all the time, right? You get into crunch time, you need a big play. Let's say it's a red zone situation again, where, as we just described, there have been some struggles. What is the play that they should dial up in order to get them over the line?
They have a couple of different options here. I don't have the playbook in front of me, Ty. But
you don't have the armband or anything like that?
I don't have the armband. I don't have the headset to listen in like allegedly Phil Knight does. But that'd be cool from afar. Just be from afar. Something to Tez Johnson over the middle because of his ability in traffic to scratch out some hidden yards or some yardage that didn't seem attainable when he caught it. He's got tremendous wiggle and has been that go-to guy. He's been a precise route runner. He's lean, and that actually works to his advantage some, that he's sort of hard to get a hand on. The other one that they've been utilizing these past couple years really, really well is a tight end screen. That's something that has been quite successful. I think Terrence Ferguson has the edge at tight end in this game, and Oregon has been able to run it the screenplay that is, with a good amount of success, getting offensive linemen out in front for something long along the sideline where it just becomes a little bit more difficult, that no matter how sound Ohio State is, especially at safety, if you've got 900 pounds coming your way, and we've all been in that situation, Ty, where it's like, what are you supposed to do? And that to me is, if Oregon is faced with that situation, it wouldn't be surprising to see them, what do you call it? Dial it up.
Yeah.
Dial it up in some kind of high leverage moment, because it has been one of the more dependable elements to this offense these past couple of years. So what do you see from Ohio State? Because we haven't seen that from Ohio State this year, that they haven't had to play a close game. Oregon has, right? They had to close out Idaho. Yikes. They had to close out Boise State, who it's looking more defensible, their performance now against Boise State.
Sure.
What is it about Ohio State late that, even though you're not a diehard Buckeye, that you're like, this is my expectation given Ryan Day and Will Howard and Jeremiah Smith and whoever from this offense?
Well, look, I mean, they go like 58 deep out wide.
Yeah.
And we can say whatever we want about Oregon's defense. I know you're big on the stat that Oregon hasn't allowed a garbage or more than a garbage time touchdown in forever. I mean, it has been a really solid defensive unit. They also haven't had to go up against a receiving core like this. So this is not to say that Will Howard should just throw it up willy-nilly, but crunch time inside 2 minutes, if you need a play and if you can get the right coverage, man on man, out wide.
Underthink it.
Underthink it, throw it up there and force Oregon to defend your guy. Force them to defend Emeka Egbuka, force them to defend Jeremiah Smith. And provided you're not going to throw a duck that gets picked off by a safety, put it in a spot where only your receiver can catch it, you stand a pretty good chance of getting a PI.
That's what I was going to say. At the very least.
At a minimum, you stand a pretty good chance of getting 15 yards and an automatic first down. I am not saying they should build the whole plane out of that strategy, but late in the game, if you need to get a first down, if you need to extend a drive, it's not the worst plan in the world.
I don't disagree. With how talented those receivers can be, and Oregon's secondary, as I think promising and strong as they can be, it's a new secondary. This is not a team that has been tested by a real offense, or a complete offense, I should say, downfield all that often. No. Next question, next serial, and on that topic, corn pops.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the pop that Ohio State will continue to have at receiver.
Gotta have my pops.
When you think about explosive plays in this game, what comes to mind? Because as we know, this is per Bill Connolly and his metrics, that the number one deciding factor, it's not turnovers, right? It's not all sorts of different elements to football beyond who generates and who stops big plays. I think that decides like 80% of games.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, pick your guy on Ohio State, right? Pick your guy. The passing game, I think, is where your mind goes first, because we know what they've got out wide. We have been inundated with not only highlights of Jeremiah Smith, but articles about Jeremiah Smith, and seemingly everyone in the college football universe talking lovingly about Jeremiah Smith.
No.
I think that goes without saying. I'm not going to sit here and say that all the Jeremiah Smith talk has overshadowed the other guys out wide for Ohio State, because we know that's not the case. Clearly, Oregon knows what they're up against in that regard. What I would like to see, and what I think is entirely possible, if you're Oregon, you've got to play this calculus. Do we want to play deep, or deep enough to contain the passing game? Do we want to play a little bit closer to the line to go up against what has been a pretty good Ohio State offensive line and a running game that still has potential to beat you? Whether it's Quinshon Judkins or Travion Henderson, I think with so much attention to the passing game, there's probably a real opportunity here for Chip Kelly to dial up some kind of run that's going to put Oregon, in something of a pretzel, trying to cover kind of all facets of this thing. So if I'm thinking of pop, maybe I'm overthinking it a little bit outside of the passing game, but I think what they could bring to bear on the ground is actually something that's a little bit more concerning.
Yeah, something from the Oregon side that we haven't actually seen a ton of is the pop deep. And Dillon Gabriel doesn't have the biggest arm, but what Evan Stewart does possess, is that ability to take, man, he's really good. He can take the top off of a defense at his best.
Sure.
We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know. Ohio State's really good. That's where my mind goes initially, just because we haven't seen it this year. Jordan James is a good running back, but the top end speed isn't there, and that's okay because he's just really good at breaking loose. I think you touched on something interesting, and that's Ohio State on the ground. They've been more explosive on the ground than they have been through the air. They're still feeling themselves out through the air a little bit.
They've been very explosive on the ground, and it is a matchup that I think is also favorable for Ohio State going into this game, because if you compare both sides of the Oregon defense, I mean, just some of the advanced analytical stuff that we like to nerd out over, like seemingly most of the red on the spreadsheet is on the Oregon rushing defense, not as much the passing side of things, which should bear well for them here going up against a premier passing offense like Ohio State. But clearly they have other options where they can beat you on the ground as well. So I'm curious to see how Chip Kelly utilizes his backs.
Mallorca.
Yes.
Hey, here's a little wrinkle, Ty. Oregon had to play Ashton Genty, and Ohio State didn't.
Look,
okay, that turns numbers red. Okay,
I get it. I totally get it.
Not fun.
I don't want to crucify him too much over that, but
yeah,
I do think it's worth mentioning that if we're looking at these things, obviously more red is on the side of the rushing defense.
No, as I was looking at the different aspects of this game, previewing it for our preview show on Wednesday, my heart started beating really fast. Looking at what Ohio State, and I rewatched the Iowa game and what they were able to do in terms of, it was yardage before Iowa players were getting their hands on Judkins and Henderson.
Yeah.
It was, the lanes were huge. They were running pistol sets. They were running outside zone. They were running counter stuff. They were running a varied offense, and they were running free for 6-7 yards before Iowa was making a play. And so that to me is huge for Oregon, is just keeping them a little bit behind the chains to set up 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 8s, whatever. So that to me is the biggest element of pop in this game, is what Ohio State's able to generate and what Oregon's able to stop on first down if Ohio State is turning and handing the ball over.
Just remember this stat. Yeah. Oregon nationally 56th as a defense in how many yards per carry they are allowing before contact. Contact. That is not the worst by any stretch. But against a good team, a good offense with a solid line, an improved line like Ohio State, that's not good enough. That's something that could come into the equation.
All right, let's talk Special K. Let's talk Chip Kelly some more. And I want to talk Chip Kelly and Will Stein.
Light, crisp, Special K.
In what you feel like the back and forth between these offensive coordinators will be, because obviously it's a new year where you can talk to your quarterbacks, while they're out on the field with radio communication. Somebody can talk to them. And we've seen Oregon's offense look good but not great, and see Ohio State's offense look just bulletproof, just incredible so far against basically nobody, and a kind of a good defense in Iowa, but not where the Iowa's defense has been. So when you look at the sort of chess match involved with how these offenses are going to come out and game plan, what excites you?
Well, the wrinkle that I'm most interested in is obviously Chip Kelly going back to Oregon is kind of a story unto itself.
Again, he's lost there already.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, he was there when he was UCLA coach, and now he's there kind of in a different capacity. But, this is a guy who has historically gotten very creative with his quarterbacks, especially ones that he can put on the move. We haven't seen Will Howard do a whole lot of moving this year. Currently, if you project out his season, he is on pace for his fewest rushing attempts as a quarterback since he's been a starter. This is not to say Will Howard is a guy we think of as a running quarterback, but he is a big quarterback who can move. And given the fact that we have not seen that side of the offense at all for Ohio State this season, I just wonder if the moment is right, if they need a couple hard yards, if everybody is covered down the field, and Oregon is scoping out Quinshaw Judkins and Travion Henderson to the point where they are rendered somewhat contained. I just wonder if we see in that moment Chip Kelly try to utilize Will Howard's legs. He is 6'5", 235. He can move. He can knock some people over. We saw him do that a bit at Kansas State. Again, this is not to imply that this is a premier side of his game. It is clearly not, but he can do it.
He can move.
And they have not shown much of that this season. So this would be the moment in a big road spot in Eugene for them to unleash some of those wrinkles that they might have hiding in the nooks and crannies of the playbook.
Yeah, and he ran a little bit against Iowa, but certainly not as an element of the main game plan against the Hawkeyes last week. And yeah, you're not wrong. And I don't think it's just by design. It's also if the Oregon pass rush flushes him out, what is he able to do on 3rd and 4? Can he get to the the sticks and pick up that first down. That I think is going to be huge.
Sure.
In terms of on the Oregon side with Will Stein, is we saw sort of an uneven offensive performance early on, and then it opened up on the road against Utah last year, especially up the middle of the field. I don't know if that's true with the shorter quarterback and Dillon Gabriel, but I think a lot of it's going to be Will Stein's eyes and sort of look back at me, let's change it up. I see something quickly, and we're going to run this new element of this play, something like that, or we're going to call to the other play, and that there's going to be fast checks with this Oregon offense, whereas I don't think the Ohio State defense is quickly checking in and out of things. That might be an advantage, that Oregon's able to get to the line quickly and hurry up and look at me. That to me is going to, I think, speak volumes, especially early on in the game. When Oregon's played these big games, when Dan Lanning's had these moments, whether it was against the 3 matchups against Washington these last couple years, it's been slow starts, especially in that Pac-12 championship game last year. Slow starts. Oregon crawled its way back. Slow start, though. And so that, to me, is going to be huge, looking at that sort of push-pull between the offensive coordinators. Final regular element, Lucky Charms, Ty. So you can't say this player. You can't say that coach. You can't say anything specific. What is something working for or against either of these teams that you feel like will come into play?
Is it too obvious to say that Oregon's playing at home in a very loud environment?
No.
I mean, look, we have talked about it for a few weeks running now on the podcast. The numbers right now, and it could and probably will change, are overwhelming in favor of the home team when another Big Ten squad is traveling 2 or more time zones to get there.
Right.
There is this element of body clocks. There is this element of travel. We saw James Franklin this week lamenting his own travel situation with Penn State and how they had to get to USC from State College to begin with. So it's not lost on me that Ohio State is traveling pretty far out west to the Pacific Northwest, a couple time zones. Will that play a factor? It's hard to say, but the numbers thus far have indicated that it has. Obviously, Eugene is a loud place to play. This is a situation for Ohio State that I think is kind of new. Honestly, this season, wherever they have gone so far this season, none of them have been as hostile as what they're about to experience in Eugene. So how will Howard respond to that? How will youth Jeremiah Smith respond to that? Will we see more penalties in the Ohio State side of things? I tend to think they're pretty buttoned up at this point. They're one of the few teams I feel I can trust in college football. But if college football has proven anything so far in this young season, it's that just when you think you can trust anybody, forget about it. So what's Ohio State look like on the road in Eugene, Autzen Stadium? I don't know.
That's huge. The thing that I think is a nice positive X factor for Ohio State here is they've had a measuring stick opponent that I don't think Oregon really truly has. They've both played Michigan State similarly. I think Ohio State won 38-7, something like that. Oregon won 31-10, but it was a quick touchdown for Michigan State in the Ohio State game, and it was a late garbage time touchdown. So it was the rhythms were pretty similar in those ones. But that Oregon hasn't played against a defense like Iowa's, and Ohio State with a new quarterback, with a new side of their running back room, with a new center, with an offensive line with questions coming into the season, had that measuring stick defense to play against ahead of Oregon, where Oregon hasn't had that defense to play against. That's something interesting, that Ohio State can self-scout in a way on offense that Oregon hasn't quite been able to do. And to prepare for a game like this, I don't know. I think that's pretty enormous that you have that experience and that rhythm. So, yeah, I think the crowd is huge, and I think the ability that measuring stick opponent that Ohio State, in the second half especially, was able to succeed against, I think that's pretty huge here.
Yeah, I actually like the fact that they struggled for about a half against Iowa.
Yeah.
This is not to say that they were punched in the mouth, because Iowa didn't offer a whole lot of threat on the offensive side of things.
They can diagnose.
But their ability to kind of go in at halftime, come out renewed, recharged, go at things with a little bit of a different approach. And then, again, as we've joked, I mean, you go for the long P, and then suddenly they're up 28 points. It's just the style of football that Ohio State plays this year. I like the fact that they had a little bit of adversity so far that they had to deal with. And, we'll see. It's going to be a very, very tough road environment, though. And I'm sure Oregon's going to be extremely loud.
All right, we have two fan bases sick of their coach losing 3 straight games against the most important team on the schedule. Which coach should be in a better place mentally to make big calls in a matchup like this? Ryan Day, Dan Lanning?
Oh, it's Dan Lanning. It's 100% Dan Lanning. I have to believe the pressure on Ryan Day is insufferable. Insufferable to try and...
But not necessarily for Saturday night.
Well,
got to beat Michigan this year for sure.
You got to beat Michigan, and it'll probably be worse for the Michigan game. That goes without saying. But I just...
Yeah.
With how much of the offseason narrative centered around Ohio State and how targeted they were, how successful they were in the portal, how it seems as if they were extremely aggressive going out and getting a guy like a Chip Kelly. They have been single-minded in this pursuit of not only beating Michigan, but now getting back to national prominence. It should, in theory, be easier this year to at least have a shot at it given the expanded playoff field. But clearly, big games now is where Ryan Day's pressure is amped up to 1,000. This is not to say that Dan Lanning is not going to feel that, because what has the rub been on Dan Lanning? He hasn't really won the big game, right? You mentioned it. But I think Ohio State traveling into this hostile road environment, knowing what the expectations are back home in Columbus, I don't know. Feels to me like that is much more of a pressure cooker than Dan Lanning, who, look, still needs to win the big one. But if Ohio State drops one this early, that's a problem for Ryan Day.
Yeah, I think if it weren't for Ryan Day in this sport, Dan Lanning would have a brighter spotlight on the fact that Oregon has lost
100%,
these 3 games
100%.
in a row to Washington. But yeah, the spotlight is just brighter in Columbus. So I think that's right. I think Dan Lanning won't go away from being aggressive. And I think Ryan Day did the right thing in bringing in Chip Kelly. I think both of these people are in the right headspace to win this game. I think they're quality coaches. I think they've hired really well. But based on how really both of these teams, but Ohio State is just a bigger school right now, how they spent with guys like Caleb Downs and bringing back guys like JTT back on this defense, how they've spent on coordinators, I think there is more pressure on Ryan Day to win a game like this, even on the road.
Do we get any kind of awkward presser from Ryan Day, from Dan Lanning, whoever wins this game in the immediate aftermath? I'm assuming it's going to be a relatively close game. Maybe I'm wrong in that assumption. I think it'll be relatively close. My expectation is that it'll be hard fought one way or the other. Are we expecting the semi-awkward press conference with Catherine Tappan, whoever's on the sidelines for NBC, immediately after the game goes final?
I don't know how it's not awkward. These guys have poured their entire lives this week into this game in a way that is just different from other weeks, just because it's network TV, the biggest game maybe of the season to this point, other than Georgia, Alabama, that, yes, the eyes of the sport will be on this game. And so, yeah, you'll get some weird answers.
I love it.
I'm good with that.
I love it. I can't wait.
Speed. Get ready for rush hour.
All right, let's go. Speed round. Other games in the Big Ten we're not fully ignoring, but we have, take your pick, Ty. Rutgers, Wisconsin. Who do you have?
I'm on Wisconsin plus the 2.5 points or whatever it ends up being. I feel like these teams are dead even, if I'm being honest with you. I don't like the fact that Wisconsin is traveling to Rutgers, but I am going to take Wisconsin plus the points just because I think that game's close and ugly, and I'd much rather have points than lay them.
I full disagree. I love Rutgers there, and I don't think Wisconsin has the offense to do much against Rutgers because I just don't think there's much there. USC, Penn State.
I'm on Penn State to win. The point spread has bubbled and bobbled a bit from 5.5 down to 4, down to 3, and so I don't know how I feel about that. I probably am less confident in laying any points there, but I do think Penn State wins, and I think it's dictated mostly because of the ground game. I think Penn State can set a tone on the ground, up front, push USC around over the course of 60 minutes, maybe use that to kind of open up some pass plays a little bit deeper down the field, or at least find more creative ways to use Tyler Warren in the passing game or some sort of trick play, as we know James Franklin is wont to do. So I've got Penn State something like 31-27, somewhere in that neighborhood.
USC's not good, Ty. I'm just telling you right now. USC's not good. They're not who they were
You've been
against
saying
LSU.
this. I think they're better.
Lost their best linebacker. They've got guys redshirting. Like, it's not good. Okay, I've got Penn State comfortably. Next game, Illinois, Purdue. You have big Purdue here, right?
Yeah, right.
No.
I don't think I would go Purdue for anything right now. As we're recording this, the line is what? Illinois minus 23 points, something in that neighborhood.
Right.
It just feels like Purdue is off to a horrible start. They just got rid of Graham Harrell, their play caller. It just feels like the team is in a bit of disarray, and I don't want to place my money on that side of anything right now. So I'm going Illinois minus whatever.
Same. UCLA, this would be ordinarily a great spot for UCLA with Minnesota coming off of a big emotional win after they drank their gummy Sprite or whatever did after.
It was the antidote of confidence, right? Isn't that what he called
Yes.
it?
The antidote of confidence. Great spot for UCLA. Big flight out west to sort of take advantage of an emotionally spent Minnesota team. UCLA hasn't scored a second half touchdown in Big Ten play this year, or really just since that Hawaii game. They've played 4 top 20 opponents: LSU, Oregon, Penn State, Indiana. They don't do anything in second halves. Minnesota, I think, can quietly sit on them. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to favor Minnesota in a game like this. I do worry that there might be a bit of a letdown given the way that they beat USC a week ago. Remember, it's 4th and goal. Instead of kicking the field goal, they decide they're going to do the quarterback sneak. It goes to the replay. They determine that Max Brosmer is in the end zone, even though we didn't necessarily see the ball cross the plane or anything like that. So that's a big emotional win. I hope it boosts the confidence, even on top of whatever weird confidence antidote they drank, which apparently contains Sprite. Whatever. Yeah. Would love to hear more about that story. I worry a little bit about that letdown potential, but I do feel like UCLA is down pretty bad. I don't have a really good reason to pick UCLA against, at the end of the day, what we know is a decent enough defense on the Minnesota side of things. So give me the Gophers.
Yeah. To be clear, they did score a garbage time touchdown with 16 seconds left against Penn State. I don't count that as a second half touchdown. No. Not for me. Final matchup, Washington, 9 a.m., their local body time, taking on Iowa. Iowa coming off of a sound defeat to Ohio State. Washington coming off of a big emotional win over Michigan, a sort of revenge spot after last year's national championship. What you got?
Well, Iowa's favored, and I think they're favored for a reason. Yeah. I saw that line. My eyebrows went up a little bit because I do genuinely think that neutral field, Washington's probably the better team. If it were a bowl circumstance, like in the old days when teams like this could play in the Rose Bowl, I would be inclined to pick Washington in a game like that. But I just think with them now traveling back across the country, there's a reason Iowa's favored. It's because of the defense. I think it'll be close. I think it'll be ugly. I think Iowa will win something like 21-17.
Caleb Johnson eats against Washington this week. So I have Iowa covering this spread as well. And speaking of which, Ty, quite the spread at Studio One Cafe in Eugene, Oregon. Ty, what's your order at Studio One right near campus, just south of campus, I believe?
You know, I'm a simple man, Dan.
Everybody says that about you.
I'm a simple man. I'm humble when it comes to my breakfast. I go with the natural. Give me the natural. Okay. It's sort of like a build your own breakfast situation. If you've watched this show for any amount of time at this point, we're 7 weeks into the season, I tend to favor these build my own breakfast.
Man, Ty,
build my own breakfast scenarios. Every now and again, I'll branch out. I'll get whatever the special is, but I see the natural. I think of myself, frankly, when I hear that.
Yeah.
And I want to build my own breakfast in a way that suits my tastes. So I'll keep it simple, stupid.
I know where I'm eating. I'm eating in the Pacific Northwest, the great Pacific Northwest. I'm going French toast here. I'm getting bacon. I'm getting those home fries extra burnt.
Oh, this is your thing.
Well done.
Yeah, this is your thing.
They look like great home fries. Maybe a bowl of fruit. Maybe head over to Wandering Goat for some freshly roasted coffee. Ty, there's a lot you can do. You're, again, Pacific Northwest. You got to go premium with your coffee. This is what I'm doing. I'm going French toast here at Studio One Cafe. Who's your winner? Oregon, Ohio State. Who comes away with the dub?
I go Ohio State.
Disagree.
I go Ohio State. I think Ohio State's the better, more complete team at this point. There are too many guys that you got to cover out wide. Too many guys you got to cover in the backfield. It's hard to account for somebody like a Will Howard, and the line has been really, really solid this year. It's been drastically improved from what we saw a year ago. I think the combination of all the weapons they've got on offense with what I think is kind of an underrated defense in its own right, because everyone's talking about the offense. I tend to favor Ohio State in this one, but I think it's a fun game. Give me something like 34-28 Buckeyes.
34-30 Oregon. Eat at Studio One. Drink at Wandering Goat. Subscribe to the Solid Verbal and this channel for Big Ten breakfast. And if you want to text Ty, 610. What's the number, Ty?
No, we're not doing that.
Thank you for watching. See you next week.